14 Bannerman Road is where Sarah Jane Smith lived.
And 14 Bannerman Road is the name of my podcast about it. This time, Warriors of Kudlak Parts 1 and 2, both written by Phil Gledwin and directed by Charles Martin, with Part 1 first broadcast on the 15th of October 2007, and Part 2 first broadcast on the 22nd of October 2007. So we do a cold open, as Series 1 tends to do, with Laser Tag, Combat 3000 it's called, and it's looking a little bit naff, right? There's just like, it's sort of a dark room with some sort of fluorescent light tubes stuck on the wall, but it's kind of working in its favour. You know, it's like, okay, you're in a little bit of a, this is a place that has been set up for laser tag, you know. There's a fella in there, he gets trapped in a room, and then he's suddenly beamed up, and we cut to Kudlak. We don't know he's called Kudlak at this point, but, you know, he's immediately being villainous, looking at him through CCTV before the titles even roll. He's communicating with somebody only referred to as Mistress, who is saying that she needs more children. So the fella in the laser tag is a victim. So titles roll, and then Luke and Maria are walking down the street, and Luke is trying to make some jokes. I think he says one about murdering cornflakes and being a serial killer, and Maria, like, she could have given him a little laugh. It wasn't a good joke, but she could have. But she's like, "Hey, look, this isn't funny," because the point that they're making is that he still doesn't know about human society, really. His over-analysis of the jokes is killing the joke. But Maria then asks why everything with him leads to more questions, because he's trying to figure out what exactly it is that makes a joke funny. And it's like, well, Maria, you know why everything leads to more questions. He was born, I don't know, a couple months ago at maximum. Cut him some slack. Anyway, Maria wants a new bag, and Luke says, "Hey, you got loads of bags. Why do you want a new bag? I don't understand." And she says, "You don't need to understand. You're a guy." And the whole show kind of has like a bit of an air of, we are progressive because the women are the ones making the slightly sexist remarks about the men instead of the other way around. Like last episode, there was a whole thing about the gods setting challenges, and they were like, "Oh, it must be a man thing," and it's like, well, okay, it's better than the other way around, sure, because there isn't a sort of societal, so much of a societal discrimination against men, sure, but it's very much the CBBC of its era. Like, they probably wouldn't put a line in a show like that if it were made right now. I mean, maybe, but I don't know. So we don't see them get to the shop because Luke is distracted by the laser tag that they walk by, and then a very aggressive man pops up behind him holding some pliers and asks if he's man enough to give it a go. And then Luke says, "Hey, look, I've got to go shopping," and he's like, "Well, that answers my question." So, and I'm like, I'm kind of, I don't mind his sort of misogyny in a way so much, because he is obviously a villain. So it's not going, "Hey, this is a good thing." It's not a good thing. And he's given all the villainous facial expressions. He spits out some gum onto the street. But he has a bit of charm to him, you know. And he's sort of, he hands out these vouchers. They look like posters. They look nothing like vouchers, but sure, we can assume that they're vouchers. And he hands them out. He's saying, "Half price laser tag, you know, come in here." And he's sort of, they're all like, "Oh, thanks," you know. And he's got a little bit of a charm to him, but he's clearly, when they're not looking, he is a villain. And we find out that his name is Mr. Grantham, and he is very subservient to Kudlak. He goes inside the laser tag where Kudlak's in there. And Kudlak really doesn't care about, because he comes in sniveling like, "Oh, you know, I've got handed out some more flyers for more kids," and Kudlak is, I don't care how you do it, I just need more children." But there's this very good sort of he's sitting, he's facing away, he's got a bit of a weird head shape. You're like, oh, what's this about? The chair spins round super quick. They don't even they're not going for like a slow reveal, they're going for a quick bam shock reveal. And it would have been really nice if he hadn't been slightly spoiled in the cold open, because in the cold open he's sort of in shadow and you see like a weird gross hand. And it's like, sure, but you know he's an alien then. It would have been nice if maybe Grantham was in the cold open. Or even if there was no Kudlak or Grantham or anyone at all, and it was just the feather who gets beamed up. And then, bam, alien. That would have been a nice reveal, but it seems slightly dampened a bit. But it's still quite a nice reveal. I quite like it. So, the thing to note here is that Mr. Grantham is a human who seems to be perfectly fine working with an alien. Kudlak is an alien. And Kudlak looks really cool. He is the best alien I've seen so far in this show. So well done to the prosthetics team, because we've had episode 0, we've had CGI. Episode 1, we've had reused things from Doctor Who. Episode 2, we've had basically sort of face paint that's mostly hidden under a veil. Now episode 3, we're coming in hard with the great big prosthetic face mask thing. It looks like a praying mantis mixed with a cockroach. The eyes move, the little mouthy bits move, and it genuinely looks great. I want one. It's the sort of thing where you would put it on display in the daytime and you'd be like, oh, this looks awesome, and then the nighttime would come and it would cast shadows on it that would terrify the life out of you. I really like how he looks. Cut to Sarah Jane investigating the disappearance of Lance Metcalf, who is the boy from the opening. So she's talking to his mum, and his mum is saying, hey, Lance's dad has died, and now Lance has gone missing. This is a very emotional moment. She's crying. She's pleading to Sarah, hey, can you need to get my son back. Slightly overshadowed by the fact that they're in Lance's bedroom and he appears to have 15 of the same poster up on his wall in a 5x3 grid. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. I've had various posters up on my wall throughout the years. Never 15 of the same one. I don't know why. I don't know why that's a thing. It's just a weird thing to point out, isn't it? So, back at 13 Bannerman Road, the gang's all there. I'm calling them the gang. The show never calls them the gang. I don't know what it. I'm not sure if it even does ever refer to them, as a group. Doctor Who currently likes to go with the fam. But I mean, I'm not sure. Well, I say currently. Half the fam are gone now, but that's besides the point. So there's an interesting new shot of the outside as we zoom into the attic window, which looks quite sweet. And Clyde is messing around and Sarah tells him to stop, and it's a setup for Luke to get his words wrong. And I've written here in all caps, yes, we understand he was born a few months ago. Can we do something about it rather than consistently reiterating the point? And then, guess what? They decide to do something about it instead of constantly reiterating the point. Turns out that Luke came up with the nickname the Corporal for Lance, because Lance Corporal. And he thought this was a great thing because everyone at school was laughing because they went to school with Lance. And what he didn't realise that Sarah's learnt from Lance's mum is that his dad was killed in the army. And so everybody giving Lance the nickname the Corporal is probably bringing up some bad memories. And Sarah now worries that he's gone missing because Luke has inadvertently bullied him away. There's a moment where Maria says the classic, "Oh, most break times he was too busy with his Nintendo," which is a peak scriptwriter doesn't actually know what video games are. Nintendo what? Is Nintendo is a brand. Nintendo is a company. Presumably Nintendo DS, which, I mean, what a cool school to let you bring in your Nintendo DS for your break time. Maybe Game Boy. When did DS come out? This is 2007. Was DS 2005? DS or Game Boy. Um, and so it's interesting that Lance was very into games and he was drawn into Combat 3000, which is a kind of fighting, you're going around as laser tag, you're going around, you're shooting people with your lasers. After his dad died fighting, they're trying to make that link there. And Luke runs off because he's upset that he's made a faux pas now with potential serious consequences. So Clyde runs off and says, hey, I'll go and have a talk with him. So Maria is left with Sarah, and Sarah's saying, hey, I don't think it's aliens this time. Because if I was seeing aliens behind every bush, I'd be a conspiracy theory. I'd be a conspiracy theorist. And it's clear that Maria has asked, hey, was it aliens? Because she's in this for the aliens. She's in it. She's from that first alien that she saw outside Sarah's house. That's why she comes around to Sarah's, which is a little bit sad that like it's not her company or anything. She's in it for the aliens, but perhaps that'll progress. We're what are we? We're episode 3, so we're about the halfway point of the series. So maybe that'll progress, and by the end she'll be more into the entire experience. But also on the other hand, it's kind of fair enough. If you see an alien, that's a big deal. It's a very big deal, especially if you're about 15 and you've just seen an alien. And you think, oh, this is the turning point of my life. What am I going to start doing with my life? I'm going to become an alien hunter. It's at this point that I think, do these kids ever do homework? Because Clyde and Maria, they're always found. I mean, Luke, sure, he can probably do his homework in about a minute. He's got the brain power. That's his character. But Clyde and Maria, they're always found Sarah Jane's, and they can pass it off as, hey, we're going round to a friend's house, but they seem to be around this friend's house every day, which again is making me now think about what's the time period in between each episode. Well, it seems to be a little bit ambiguous. Another thought I've had is that, right, Sarah's saying, hey, it might not be aliens this time. Do they do cases? Do they take on cases where it just isn't aliens? I mean, it would make for a very boring episode. Well, potentially, depending on how it's done. But every episode is aliens. It's like, hey, this is the alien show. And with Doctor Who, that's kind of the point, because the Doctor is taking the companions to see the aliens. Whereas for this show, they are continually coming to Earth and doing something. And Torchwood had its explanation that there's the rift in Cardiff that they're coming through. But Sarah Jane Adventures doesn't really seem to have any explanation for the sheer frequency that aliens are causing havoc around Ealing. So I wonder if they will ever reference sort of other episodes that you never see, where they just did boring and mundane things, to sort of try and balance that out a bit. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's really like priority numero uno for the show. It's a kids show. I don't think anybody really cares. They just want to see more aliens. I want to see more aliens if they look like Kudlak. He looks awesome. So Sarah and Maria, they go and find Lance's friend Brandon, and he's playing a bit of a naff-looking game on an arcade machine in a cafe. And I'm thinking, okay, so is the cafe here because they couldn't get a arcade set? Because they mention, oh, they were going to go down to the arcade, like Lance and Brandon. Lance's mum mentions that. but we never get to the arcade because Brandon's in this cafe, which is it's a little bit bizarre. But we find out on this arcade machine, Lance is really good at the game, and he has named himself Halo, which again is like a slightly clunky reference, because like Halo, you'd name yourself Master Chief, wouldn't you? I've never played Halo, but if you're gonna name yourself, you'd name yourself after the character. You wouldn't name yourself after the game. You don't play Portal and then go, "Oh, I'm gonna name myself Portal." You name yourself Shell, or you name yourself GLaDOS, or you know, is it Shell or Chell? Shell seems right to me, but I've never. There's probably a canon thing that Valve has said at some point, but I've never actually heard. That was a bad example. I've shown myself up now. And so Brandon says that Lance is the nuts, and Sarah has to then go, "Oh, is that a good thing?" As if she's unaware of the slang. Of which, I mean, you'd assume she, at some point in her life, she's heard somebody call something the nuts, or an even more explicit version. You'd think at some point. It's very clunky. It's just an entirely clunky scene, which is it's sure whatever. Brandon mentions that there was a storm on Saturday when he was going to meet Lance, so maybe the storm is what put Lance off, and that's why he didn't show up. And Sarah and Maria say, "What storm? There wasn't a storm. We know what the weather was like on Saturday." And Brandon gets very defensive about this, and it's implied that he wasn't lying. Instead, the storm only lasted a moment and was very, very localized, which was quite odd. Cut to Clyde, who's gone and found Luke. Luke is being sensitive, Clyde is being cocky, water is being wet. You know, it's your standard scene. Cut to Kudlak and the mistress restating her need for children, and Kudlak restating that he will get more for her. And mistress says that her hunger for blood never ends. So it kind of implies that she's eating the children, which is horrific. But a pretty standard plot of, you know, it's an evil alien. What's it doing? It's eating your kids. Needs to be stopped. Back in 13 Bannerman Road, there seems to be a drawing of a Cyberman on Sarah Jane's wall. And she's getting Mr. Smith to check the missing kids and cross-reference that with Freaky Storms. Turns out that 24 kids have gone missing in towns and cities. They're all in towns and cities. Which covers quite a broad area, really, towns and cities. But, you know, they're all sort of, I think we can quite safely say, all cities, all places of high population. And they ask Mr. Smith, you know, does he know what would cause a sort of very localized rain? Which is when he goes, insufficient data. And I know why they do this every episode, where he gives a bit of info but not the entire thing. It's because the story would be wrapped up in completely. They need to do these little things. But they've written themselves into a corner a bit, because they've gone, Mr. Smith, he's the supercomputer, he knows everything, except these specific things that he's not allowed to know. And it makes him seem a little bit inept. But, you know, it's one of those things. We have to deal with this when making kids TV. And so Sarah and Maria go, okay, you have insufficient data, we'll go and get you some. And then they're inventing, which is great. I love that so much. Sarah just happens to have knocking around some technological parts where if you touch two of them at the same time, uninsulated, it'll form a circuit through your body that knocks you out for an hour. So she's very careful to tell Maria, hey, no, don't touch that, put on some gloves. But I love that it's just kind of lying around in the attic. This is why she originally was like, "Hey, nobody go up the attic," because she's got awful weapons in there. She will knock you out cold. Um, and I love the slightly chaotic vibe. It's I love when the 10th Doctor had just like weird gadgets that he'd come up with. Um, there was the one when all the Cybermen are coming through, and it's like all the ghosts of people that have died, and he's like got his thing and his like a backpack, and he's running around like blimmin' Ghostbusters. I love that. I love crazy stupid sci-fi gadgets. I love that we are making a crazy stupid sci-fi gadget right here. Um, and Maria's saying, "Well, hey, we could get my dad involved in this, and we can just pretend it's a school project because he's got a load of tools." Sarah turns around wearing a welding mask with a welding torch. She's like, "You got one of these?" Which is, I love her with all of my heart. Um, Going back to Luke, he's misunderstanding a lot of things, and he doesn't know why people would play a combat game. Like, why would you play Combat 3000? Why would you play laser tag? Because you're going around pretending to shoot people. Why? Why is that fun? And Clyde is saying, okay, well, right, if I can't explain it to you, why don't we try it out firsthand? You've got a couple of tickets, a couple of vouchers for half price. Why don't we go and try it? Which is a pretty neat way to tie in the side plot into the main plot. The side plot of Luke. It's just a thread that runs through the show of Luke doesn't understand um, humans basically, and although despite being made from them, is what would you? He's not technically Bane. He is fully human DNA. He's just a lot of human DNA. He's just too much human DNA. And so there they go. Okay, well, let's do this experience because they don't know that Combat 3000 is making kids disappear. Let's go and bring that in for the story. Um, and but I start to worry that the message of the episode is going to be video games are bad. Don't play these combat games because there might be aliens running the show and they'll eat your kids. Which, but is sort of a metaphor for you should stay away from these violent games. Which, sure, if you're underage and all that, but it's sort of a bit of a tired message even in 2007. A sort of like holdover satanic panic. Oh, we're not in the 80s anymore, and we can't blame Dungeons and Dragons, so let's move on to video games as the new thing to target. I start to worry, so I'm keeping sort of that in the back of my mind. We get a Dutch angle of the outside of Combat 3000. Everybody cheer. We can't go an episode without a Dutch angle, and I love it. It's keeping up the streak. Kudlak is saying that they need to work harder. He's saying this to Mr. Grantham. He's saying we need to work harder because all the kids that are being brought in are subpar. So you're thinking, okay, does she only eat very specific kids then? That's interesting. What happens to the others? And Mr. Grantham mocks the mistress a bit, saying that she should come out and hand out some flyers herself. Kudlak gets very, very defensive of the mistress. Sarah and Maria have made this clunky old device, and it's like got a trombone on the side of it that you wiggle about, and it's amazing, and I love it. And it looks stupid. It looks a bit like the 11th Doctor's TARDIS, where it was just crashed into a shed and is now full of random parts. It's just whatever that you can find in the attic all glued together, big horn on there and everything. Absolutely amazing. And it fires out what looks like regeneration energy. It isn't, but looks like kind of sort of the same effect. Fires it out into the clouds from the top of a hill. They're out there in broad daylight. Metaphorically, it's cloudy. They're out there in overcast daylight. But thank God there's nobody around to see this energy all firing up from the top of the hill. And they can't seem to get any reaction from it until they can when it rains down a load of entanglement shells. And they bring them back to Mr. Smith, and he reveals, once they're back home, the entanglement shells are used to terraform hostile environments. And he says this in a very sort of techno-babbly way, so Sarah Jane has to sort of translate for Maria. And there's a lot of side-eye in this episode. There's just a lot of, whenever somebody says something, somebody else is giving a facial expression, and this time it's Mr. Smith being too over-scientific, and all the side-eye that they're just giving. I don't know, there's just a hell of a lot of face acting. But the fact that they use to terraform hostile environments is by the by, because the main focus is that they are also a byproduct of teleportation. Teleportation, eh? Who has teleportation tech? Not humans. So, Sarah goes, aliens. I knew it. The issue I have with this is that she didn't. She didn't know it. Because at the start of the episode, she went, it's not aliens. If I saw aliens hiding behind every bush, I'd be a conspiracy theorist. So, sure, just try and rewrite history there, Sarah. I know what you said. We've got it on recording. Mr. Smith is showing off hacking NATO satellites to get precise data about the storms. And there's a lot of zoom and enhance and all this stuff. Reveals that Combat 3000 is at the heart of this most recent storm. Cut to Luke and Clyde. Luke ends up being absolutely brilliant at Combat 3000 with Clyde second. And it turns out that Luke didn't just absorb all the brain power of all the kids that he's made from, he's absorbed the reflexes. So I wonder if that'll ever come up again, or if that's one of those things that's just really good for one story and then gets thrown away, like in Doctor Who, when you start off New Who with the Ninth Doctor having all these weird powers, like the one where there's like swinging blades, and he can like get in tune with the timing of the universe or something and step through them without being sliced up. You don't see much of that in Doctor Who nowadays, do you? I want to see Jodie Whittaker stepping through blades doing like weird ninja matrix stuff. But no, that's been completely forgotten about. And I wonder if Luke's amazing reflexes will ever be brought up again. I'd bet money on no. But we'll see, if I remember. We get a Star Wars reference from Clyde, saying that he is Obi-Wan Kenobi because he's mentoring Luke. It's quite a good one. I like that. So they've been so good that they have been recruited by Mr. Grantham to try level 2. So Sarah Jane and Maria turn up at this point, and they're greeted by a receptionist who's absolutely bored out of her mind going through the motions, which is quite funny. She holds up her hand and she's like, zap those drones. And we're like, okay. The entirety of Combat 3000 has the feeling of being a bit cheesy and a bit naff, and I quite enjoy that. You know, that they didn't have to put in a detail like that, but it's quite funny. And Sarah says, "Hey, I'd like to book a party here," right? Because that's her cover, really. That's the reason she's giving for being here. And she says, "Hey, I'd like to book a party here because I've heard this place is the nuts." Didn't expect us to call back to that one. But she says it with such joy too. Like she's really happy that she's down with the kids. But Maria makes her swear to never do it again, which, yeah, I agree. So the receptionist is saying, honestly, right, she's not doing a great receptionist job, but it's fair enough. She's saying you shouldn't book a party here, if I'm going to be honest with you. Just go and see a film or something, because it's all gone downhill after Mr. Grantham and Mr. Kudlak took over. And then she goes off sort of into her own little world of contemplating quitting. So Sarah Jane and Maria run off to find Mr. Kudlak because the elusive Mr. Kudlak, who nobody ever sees. I wonder why, because he's got a praying mantis head. And Mr. Grantham is telling the kids that the first kid to get past level 2 will get into the World Championships, which sounds to me like nonsense. But all the kids, I mean, they're 15, but they seem a bit younger, really. They all seem gullible enough to believe this. But it seems to me like utter nonsense, because what you get past level 2 of this laser tag game, you win a World Championships, that's insane. Because it's completely made up. And then you start to think, okay, well, they're being like really weeded out as like the toughest ones. So maybe the mistress isn't eating the kids, but is recruiting them. Mr. Grantham is, despite it all being lies, he's selling it quite well, because basically everything he says about the Ultimate Warrior needs to be on guard for surprise attacks and everything. That's true, there will be people that jump out at them. Sarah has another moment of ineptitude. Like, I'm thinking back to the one in episode 0 where she sonics her way through a door and is met by the guards in their orange jumpsuits. This time, she sonics her way through a door into the office and is immediately caught on CCTV. So Luke is saying that he should work as a team with Clyde so they can have an advantage over all the other kids. Which I'm thinking, oh, if only one can get through, is this setting up a bit of a betrayal? Spoiler, that doesn't come to fruition, that's just a thought in my head that just, no. Because I swear Mr. Grantham said the first kid to get through, but both Luke and Clyde get through and they become sort of a bit of a team. So they just both get beamed up in the end. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here, because alarms go off. Mr. Grantham is sent in to the office and he catches Sarah Jane and Maria in the act of ransacking it, just trying to find all the info that they can. Sarah Jane turns around, pulls out her ID, and now here is a point that doesn't matter to the story but really matters to me. Her ID, we can see in our low resolution, says 21 Bannerman Road. Not 13 Bannerman Road, which is where Sarah Jane Smith lives. 21 Bannerman Road. If you've heard the previous episode, you will recall that 21 was left on the door of 13 Bannerman Road, and I thought, oh, this is a production error. The fact that her ID says 21 Bannerman Road on it. Also, why does your ID have your address? I don't know. Do people come round to her house? No, because she doesn't want them in the attic. Well, I guess they don't necessarily have to come round to the attic. It's just we always see Sarah Jane going out to other people, and I wonder why she would have her own address on her ID. Seems. Anyway, 21 Bannerman Road. They're now implying to me that that was the original idea. And now I'm thinking back to if they ever have said, throughout the series, it's 13 Bannerman Road to make it an issue, because they could have just left it as 21, because I believe 21 is the number of the actual house that is used as the set. So, if they've never called it 13 Bannerman Road, because the intro where it says that it doesn't come until Series 3, as I've previously stated, I then wonder why it was in Series 3 that they changed it. And if there's an alternate universe out there where we hear Clyde saying 21 Bannerman Road is where Sarah Jane Smith lives, and my podcast is called 22 Bannerman Road. Maybe. Who knows? Sarah says that Maria is here for work experience. Maria cottons onto that immediately and says, it's quite a in contrast to what Luke would do when Luke has like faced enemies and just basically blurted out the truth. Maria's like, no, here's a danger. Okay, I need to play along with Sarah. And she says that it was either this or scaffolding, but Grantham doesn't seem to fall for it at all. Perhaps because he's caught them in the midst of ransacking his office. So he says, "No comment." No, he doesn't say that. He says, "No comment." Now get out. Um, and when Sarah pushes further, asking about Lance, he then closes the door and he turns, pulling an alien gun on them, which is quite neat. And his accent gets even weirder here. He goes, "Do you know why people come to Combat 3000, Miss Smith? They come for the guns." It's just I quite love his acting because it's there's moments where it's really good and he leans into the villainy, and there's moments where it's just bizarre and he's playing a really bizarre facial expression or saying something in a slightly bizarre way. But I do fully believe that this actor is Cockney though, so it's quite nice to not have an actor, doing a Don Cheadle in Ocean's whatever film it is, with a really awful accent. It's like they've got a legit guy in there, so that's not distracting from the story in any way. He mentions conscience being like a stone in your shoe and it being a huge relief to get rid of it, because he's like, okay, I'm gonna shoot you, I'm gonna kill you, and he's doing his villainous gloating, and he's just an evil man. Like, he's got this front of a bit of a Cockney charm or whatever, but he's a proper evil man. And he likes to gloat so much that he doesn't get round to shooting Sarah and Maria. I mean, if I were in his position, if I were an evil man, I mean, me, David, saying this podcast, would not like to shoot Sarah and Maria. But evil man, if I were an evil man, I've got my gun out. Shoot him, fella. Anyway, there's enough time for us to cut back to Clyde and Luke, where people dressed up like the Stig, but in black rather than in white, they jump out at Clyde and Luke as they're making their way to the exit of the level, which almost seems a bit unnecessary, because Kudlak and the Mistress have already decided that they'll do. They're already looking at them going, they're ahead, they're the best ones. But it turns out that these people in like the Stigs but in black, they're slabs, right? I had to look this up because I don't remember this at all. But in the first episode of series 3 of Doctor Who, which is when I started watching, the first episode I ever saw, when the Jadoon moved the hospital to the moon, there are slabs in the hospital. They act as hired muscle. So it turns out that Kudlak has just hired a couple of slabs, or however many, he's hired quite a few actually, to just go around, doing hench work for him. Which is great. I love that. I love tying that in. It ties it into a very recent episode. They've still got all the outfits and whatever. Use them, sure. But I think I love it's Russell T Davies's Doctor Who universe. It's just another thing in the universe that has been forgotten now, but that I really liked. I liked all the weird stuff that went on in space that we never saw but was always alluded to. Like, I don't know where the slabs have come from, but they're a thing. They're a thing in the Doctor Who universe now. You can't get rid of them. But you can kind of get rid of them by never bringing them up ever again. And this, as far as I'm aware, is the last appearance of them. They appeared in one episode of Doctor Who. They appear in a two-parter of Sarah Jane Adventures, and then they are no more. So I didn't remember them at all. And throughout the episode, I was wondering where they came from. But if you were watching Doctor Who at the time, like I was, then it would have made sense. So fair enough. And there's a lot of... I'm thinking there's quite a bit of bug imagery, because Kudlak is, sort of looks a bit like a praying mantis, and I think the female praying mantises are sort of in charge, or like they eat their partners or something, and so he's sort of very subservient to his mistress. Um, they mentioned there being an emperor, which is sort of, you have like queen bees and you have like ants and things, and it's all kind of a bit like a bug sort of hierarchy, which I quite like. It might be coincidence. If it's coincidence, it's still nice. If it's on purpose, it's really nice. Um, and apparently, again, I looked this up because I don't remember it. Apparently, my memory is awful. But there was a Kudlak type of head on display in Hedrick's World of Wonders in the Doctor Who episode Nightmare in Silver. So again, love that. I love them tying the world together with that, because by that point, they'd moved on to Moffat as head writer, so Davies had gone, but they're still tying the world together, and that is one of the things I will forever love about Doctor Who so much. Even Torchwood, which I didn't like that much, it's got its tie-ins, and I love the world that they've made. Very fond of it. That's why I make this podcast. I make it out of love for it. So, Sarah's saying that she's had many guns, even alien ones, pointed at her. And Grantham says, will you die happy if I say I'm impressed? And she says she'll die happy when the kids are safe. And Grantham says, don't worry, children adore war games because games are bad. Because games are bad. Games will ruin your life. The message isn't too heavy. The message could just as easily be, hey, adults, if you're watching, regulate what your kids are playing, which is a message that I support. So, it's fine. At this point, it clicks in my head that Lance was really good at that other game, because it's saying, hey, Lance is good at games, which is why he was recruited. And we see him at the start of the episode, he's in this sort of corridor, and then he gets beamed up. Luke and Clyde have now got through level 2. They're in the corridor. You go, oh, they're going to get beamed up. Not Graham, Grantham. They're only one letter apart. Two letters. He's really pussyfooting around killing Sarah. Kudlak shouts into his earpiece for him to get a shift on. Sarah notices that he's got an earpiece in, requests, hey, you're going to kill me. Can I put on some lipstick or something? He goes, sure. She whips out her sonic lipstick. She sonics his earpiece. They escape. Smart, but also very much could have been avoided if Grantham had just shot him. Of which, so they're alive essentially by luck, which is great. It's always good when your protagonists of your show are alive just by pure luck. They notice that it's raining, so they see that the teleporter's being fired up. They run into the CCTV room, and they see Luke and Clyde on the CCTV. Luke and Clyde get transported away, and enter Kudlak. In the CCTV room, so you've got Grantham is presumably writhing in pain on the floor somewhere. Luke and Clyde have just been beamed up. Maria and Sarah Jane are in the CCTV room when enter Kudlak. They go, where have you sent them? He goes, into darkness. And roll credits on part 1. Took me a while to get to the end of part 1, didn't it? Goodness me, right, this, I don't know why, but for this episode, this is the most notes that I have ever written for one of these episodes so far, and I've no idea why. I'm on page 4 of 6, so I've written as many notes for part 2 as I have for part 1. I try and keep these going for about an hour, but it's just so many notes for this one, and I don't know why. It's not a particularly different episode. It doesn't stand out that much. It's almost kind of like a mid-series fillery little bit kind of one. doesn't tie into an awful lot. But it's there's just so many notes. So quickfire now, part 2. First thing we need to consider is that these are broadcast a week apart. That starting from the previous episode, I didn't mention this then, but these are now broadcast a week apart. So you need to consider the impact that this has of waiting a week between them, which I did not do. I watched them back to back. Well, left about an hour between them because I wanted to watch Taskmaster, but that is by the by. Clyde and Luke have been transported. Clyde doesn't think that they have. He thinks it's a weird effect, which is very reminiscent of Kelsey from episode 0. And, you know, once again, it's dude, you've literally seen aliens. Why is teleportation impossible to you? But sure. Luke is saying that he feels sick, which you think, sure, if it affects both of them teleporting, that tends to be a thing with vortex manipulators. Tends to make you feel a bit ill, I think. But why is it only affecting Luke? That never gets brought up again. So Kudlak pulls out a gun on Sarah and Maria, saying that he normally wouldn't kill unarmed women and children, but this is war. And it's like, well, when else are you going to kill unarmed women and children? When else are you going to have the chance to display your morals? This is war. Sure, you kill them in war. I hope you wouldn't kill them outside of war. And then, it's at this point that something happens. And I can't get more descriptive than something happens. Maybe Sarah sonics his gun and they escape? I don't know. There's just sort of a bang and a flash, and it's all very chaotic, and Sarah and Maria are running. And I went back and I watched it a few times, and I can't make out what happens. But Kudlak bumps into Grantham when he's chasing. He runs out after Sarah Jane and Maria at the same time that Grantham is running in. He shouts something. Kudlak. He shouts something unintelligible. I literally have no idea what's going on in this bit. What a great way to start your second part of your episode with just chaos and no idea what's going on. But he picks up Grantham by his neck and then he chucks him onto the floor. As Grantham is being picked up, he does a very comical "I'm being choked" face. This is the start of his brilliant face acting. It's ridiculous, and I love it for how ridiculous it is. But it is. I need to stress the point. It is a ridiculous face. We get a Dutch angle to try and disguise Kudlak's slow jog of pursuit. He's just jauntily jogging along after them. As they're chased into the laser tag part of the building, Sarah mentions her unit training, which is just a nice time to bring that up. And Kudlak is trying to fire at them, but he is the worst shot ever. And I kind of dislike when shows do this kind of fake peril. Even as a kid, you can tell. You can tell that your protagonists are never going to get shot because they're the protagonists of the show. So, you know that when they're getting shot at, it's never going to hit. Or if it does hit, it's never going to be a serious thing that lasts. And I kind of hate fake peril. I hate it now. I hated it then as a little 7-year-old kid. I swear I did. If you're gonna put people in peril, commit to it. Sarah manages to sonic screwdriver a door. They get outside. Luke and Clyde at this point, they're up on the ship. They don't know this yet. They've been transported. And I've written down throughout this thing black sticks because I didn't know that they were slabs. I didn't know. I couldn't remember. But Luke and Clyde have been put into a box by the slabs. Kudlak has now turned on Grantham and is about to kill him because he thinks, so now Sarah's onto them. Kudlak thinks, well, okay, look, our security's been breached. We need to evacuate. If we're evacuating, I have no more need of Grantham. He's let me down. I need to shoot him. Grantham is doing even more excellent facial expressions of please don't kill me, and his little face is all scrunched up. And Mistress chimes in saying, "No, Kudlak, we are not evacuating. I need more kids." So, therefore, Grantham has to still live. And I like Grantham being very aggressive, but very feeble under Kudlak, who is sort of his authority figure. And I'm thinking, it reminds me of when I did psychology A level, the authoritarian personality, I believe. It's just very much you assert your authority over those below you, but there are those above you who you are very subservient to. And he's a prime example. And he says, "Hey, I've got a plan. Okay, I've got a plan. I need to deal with Sarah, Jane, and Maria." We cut back to 13 Bannerman Road. We get the famous "Mr. Smith, I need you." Comes out the wall. He's running through more 3D models of aliens. Like before when we saw the Beast's son, no, I can't remember the name of. What was his name? Began with an A. Anyway, but he's doing it in this kind of toddler's 3-section puzzle game style. Remember those games of like you get the head, the torso, and the legs, and you'd make different combinations, and if you were anything like me, you wouldn't be amused by the different combinations, and you'd be like, no, there is a right way to do this. We match the right ones together. And he's matching the right eyes and the right nose and the right mouth together from Sarah Jane's description, so that we learn that Kudlak is a Uvodny. His Kudlak is his surname, so Mr. Kudlak actually makes sense. He is General Uvthavad Kudlak. And this is another thing that I looked up because I didn't remember, but friend of the show, Robin, remembered this. In the Pandorica episode with the 11th Doctor, when all the aliens come to see him, when all of them come to witness his death, obviously he doesn't die, but one of the aliens that turns up is a Uvodny. So of course I looked that up and yeah, confirmed. And it's not something that was mentioned in this episode. I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent. Of course, it wasn't mentioned in this episode. This is the first. This is the first real. This is the genesis of the Uvodny. This is the first time we see them, and I very much like that. You'd expect Doctor Who to create a thing and then spin-off shows to expand upon it, but I very much like it working the other way, of Sarah Jane Adventures creating an alien, creating a monster, creating a baddie, and then them being referenced in the main show, which is very nice. It really ties this web together very well. And as I've said 1,000 times, and I will continue to say, love it, love tying you all together. And it turns out that Kudlak is here to recruit kids as soldiers for a war that he was part of, which makes sense. Also, games are bad and they train your kids to kill, and they shouldn't be playing Call of Duty and what. It's not explicit in its messaging, but I'm getting really, I'm on edge. I'm feeling like they're about to say it. They're about to say it. I'm feeling it. It's building up. The subs are going around grunting a lot, which when I looked up the description of them, apparently they're meant to be silent. It says like they don't even breathe. So I don't know why they're going around grunting a lot all the time. But with every step they take, they're walking along and they go, rah, 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 rah. Shot from inside of the box that Luke and Clyde are in now, Luke takes apart his combat vest and he fashions a hook out of it that he pokes through the crate and uses it to unlock them and get them out. Bad description on my part, it all makes sense in the show. He is very resourceful. This is the second time that they've been locked in a tight spot like this, and he's found an item around and used it to get them out. I like that. I very much like that. That's kind of his thing, because I'm not really sure what Maria's thing is. Clyde's thing is basically just being cocky at the moment, but Luke's thing is at least his sort of resourcefulness that I'm very fond of. So they get out of the crate and they find more crates and they find more kids of them, more kids in them, and one of the kids they find is Lance. Ooh. Back at 13 Bannerman Road, Mr. Smith very much likes to go, oh, I can't do that because it would require this very specific thing that I can do. It's like he fakes them out a lot. He implies that he can't do a thing and then he can. And it's just him showing off. It's Mr. Smith for a, his personality is annoying. He has a personality and it's really annoying. He's not your blank, computer. He is a character. And I slightly hate him. But he manages to track the beam that took Clyde and Luke. But then Sarah hears a noise downstairs. Grantham's broken in. 13 Bannerman Road isn't really not very secure. Because Chrissy managed to break in last episode. Now Grantham has managed to break in. With his gun. And honestly, he should just shoot Sarah. Because she's already escaped him before. But it's at this point when he needs to gloat even further. And he reveals that he's basically just in this for the money. But I don't know how much more money he's going to get for this. This isn't really a money-making scheme. Kidnapping children. Like, is Mistress paying him for this? And in what currency? Presumably you Vodney don't have, pound sterling. It's really weird. He just seems to be an evil man, and he just wants an excuse to be evil. He's really horrible. But he has gloated for long enough for Maria to run downstairs with the, with the sort of glove things and pick up the bit of the tech, from part one that'll knock you out, jams them both into his neck, he gets zapped, he falls on the floor. He'd been mocking Sarah a bit and being like, oh, you're done for. And then when he's lying there on the floor, Sarah basically leans over him and goes, no, you're done for. And it's very fun. Back on the ship, the kids are all hiding from one of the slabs. When he opens a crate, one of the kids runs out, shoves him in the crate, and then all the kids run off trying to find a way out. But the slab, he's got a gun on him, so he shoots his way out of the crate and pursues them. A lot of good old Doctor Who style chases. That's what Doctor Who's about. It's about running away from scary monsters. That's what the show's about, and the Sarah Jane Adventures has taken this to heart. All the kids are running by, they look out of a window and they see the Earth. You get the slightly stupid thing from Lance of, when did the moon turn blue? And you get another Star Wars reference of that's no moon, and they're all like, it can't be. And they all stop there to look at Earth that they're now seeing from space. And I'm assuming this is a 3D model. I'm assuming it's like a 3D render. It might be 2D, it might be a NASA picture, but I don't... It's very close. It's very, I've never seen a NASA picture look like that. I'm assuming it's 3D, because they're doing quite a lot of 3D modelling in this episode. And it looks great. It's in low res. But in your standard def thing that I'm looking at it looks brilliant. And then we get a zoom out from the window to the Uvodny ship that all the kids have been beamed up to. And wow, they got a budget for this episode, huh? They're doing a full-on 3D model of a ship orbiting Earth. It looks great. I love it. So Mr. Smith has revealed now at the same time as we get the revelation, hey, they're on a ship orbiting Earth. Mr. Smith reveals this to Sarah Jane and Maria. Interesting that they've kind of split up this episode into like a boys team and a girls team. But Sarah's saying, okay, well, you know what? It's not ideal, but it's lucky because they could have been sent off to the Uvodny planet, and then we'd have no hope of getting them back. Which again is a great thing of the show. This is the show where they go, we're not going to other planets, we're staying on Earth. But also they very much lampshaded anybody going, well, that's lucky, by Sarah Jane just getting in there before they can. And going, hey, this is lucky, we recognise this. And Maria's panicking a bit about this, but Sarah says, hey, look, I've got a plan. Grantham, who's out cold downstairs, he's going to help us out. Now, the interior of the Uvodny ship has really got a sort of low-budget sci-fi dark industrial corridor vibe, which I quite like because it's quite a staple of sci-fi. So it looks bad, but in a good way, you know? Kudlak has beamed himself up to the ship. He finds all the kids there. And we get now an actual shot of the mistress, and she is indistinguishable from Kudlak, except for one detail, which is an absolutely blinging necklace. She has got the best, shiniest necklace you could ever wish for. And all the kids sort of brought in before her, and they say, "Hey, we don't want to fight your war. We're kids. None of us want to fight for you. We don't want to die for you." And Clyde, at this point, makes the distinction between saying, yeah, we're all good at Combat 3000, but that is just a game. That is not real-life war, which is brilliant, because I thought this episode was going in totally a different direction, and now you've got Clyde in here making the point that I would make, and I love it. And Mistress says, well, okay, you've got two options. You can go and fight, and the outcome is that you either die or you're a hero. Or you can not fight and we just kill you here. So you might as well fight. Sarah and Maria have zip-tied Grantham, and they're forcing him to take them to the teleporter at Lipstick Point, pointing at him, saying, hey, we'll probably zap your ears again or whatever. At this point, Grantham, it might just be his accent, but he seems to call Kudlak Bart Ugly instead of Butt Ugly, which sounds like maybe CBBC trying to censor Butt Ugly. But I can't tell if it's the accent or if it's awful censorship. He makes a reference to Star Wars, but saying something about all the kids are in a galaxy far, far away. And that might have maybe been implanted into his head for when Clyde made the reference to him about Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is really nice. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but it again, it's one of those things where if it's a coincidence, it's nice, and if it's actually planned, then it's really nice. Sarah says that if he doesn't help them, they'll report him to the police because he's linked to loads of missing kids. And then she says, I doubt a man like you would fare well in prison. Which is presumably quite a dark allusion to the fact that he would get presumed to be a paedophile if all these kids have gone missing. And then, all the other prisoners would rip him to shreds. Which is really dark. I mean, I know they're not saying it outright, but crikey, I don't know what else he could be, I don't know what else he could mean. So, woof, okay. We get possibly one of the first completely full-body shots of Kudlak, and he's really just wearing a red coat. That's his costume. His face, his whole being, excellent. Costume, not so much. But he seems to be having some second thoughts actually about sending in more and more kids in as cannon fodder. So that's interesting because he seemed to be quite aggressive throughout this episode and quite into war and everything. Grantham says that Mistress is the one that calls the shots, not Kudlak, and we really see that here. We see he mentions peace, and then Mistress is going, no, peace is for farmers. Humans are aggressive. This is what they're made for. We need more warriors. Clyde makes another Star Trek reference because all the kids have been locked back up in another room. Luke and his amazing brain manages to use Clyde's phone to like wire it up to the ship's computer, and they pull up a map of the ship. And Lance says, "Oh, this map looks just like the Isle of Wight ferry," which is just really weird. I don't know why he says that. And Clyde is very snarky and is like, "Oh yeah, just like the ferry," but it's like I don't. Well, why? I don't. Somebody please explain that to me. Um, so on the map they find a shuttlecraft, and now presumably the plan that they have is for a bunch of kids to get in a shuttlecraft and fly back down to Earth. And so Lance is like, "Sure, well, you brought up a map, but can you get us out of this room?" And Luke says, "Oh yeah, want to wager?" And then Clyde is like, "Mate, no," because throughout this episode Clyde has been trying to teach him more slang. And he goes, "No, you should have said want to bet." Like, it's bet slang? I mean, well, yeah, it is, currently, but not in 2007, not like that. Like, I think Wage is totally fine. I think this is a really weird moment for Clyde to point that out anyway. Very bizarre dialogue in this moment. But Sarah and Maria get Grantham to beam them up to to the ship on the threat that if he messes with them, Mr. Smith will contact the police and get him arrested. So all the kids are now escaped again for the second time, running about the ship. The slabs are going after them. The slabs are all terrible shots. They're very Stormtrooper. Sarah and Maria have come up to the ship. They have their moment of seeing the Earth like all the kids did. And it seems slightly inappropriate to stop the episode here to appreciate the Earth, like considering all the drama going on. But apparently this is a genuine thing that happens to astronauts when they see the Earth from space. They become overwhelmed, and it's quite nice in a way to go, no, this is important. Look, this is the Earth. Everybody needs to see this and think this is the one planet we have, and we need to take care of it. And they just take a little moment to acknowledge that, and I go, okay. And then Sarah comes into the room where Mistress is through her screen. She's confronting the Mistress. She's referring to Luke as her son now, which I've picked up on, which is very nice. And all the kids are running around, and Luke says, "Hey, I found something on the computer." And Clyde says, "Well, can it wait? Because we found the shuttle." And the CGI on that one is a little bit more naff, but I'll let it slide. Now, for the third time, the kids are all rounded up by Kudlak and his slabs. They're brought into the room where Sarah is saying that kids shouldn't be in war, and Maria is saying that the kids don't even want war. The adults have ruined lives and they've ruined the planet with war, and we don't want any of that, which is a brilliant point. Go on, Maria. And Mistress says, no, you must want war, because look at all of your violent video games. Why are you making violent video games if you don't want war? And Maria says, they're just games. Great. Yes, they're just games. This is a point that I agree with. This is a point that I'm trying to make, that I thought the episode was going to argue against, and has now turned around to the general consensus of the gaming industry right now, that I agree with. And yeah, I like this. I'm liking the message of this episode. It's going against all the sort of satanic panic and, games will turn your kids crazy and turn them all into killers, and people have been killing people for thousands of years. There's not been a significant uptick after games were invented. There's a significant difference between a game about war and actual war. All that stuff. I like it. I stand fully with what Maria is saying, and I like that this episode is making those points. So then we get the sort of implication that something is a bit dodgy, because Sarah is questioning, oh, okay, well, speaking of war then, what's going on at this front line? And Mistress is sort of like, oh, well, evading the question. Previously in the episode, Kudlak has said that he hasn't heard from the front line in a while. And we're going, oh, okay, the seeds are being planted here. So Kudlak walks into the room with Sarah Maria in it, with Mistress in it. He's brought all the kids in tow. At this point, Luke shouts out, "Hey, I hacked your ship's computer. I found out that the war is over." You found out that the war is over, huh? You found out that the war is over? There's the revelation that the seeds were being planted for. He plays a message from the Emperor. Once again, looks exactly the same. They may have only made one head model, but it's fine. They're like bugs. Like bugs kind of look the same. It all ties in. It's fine. And he plays this message that the Mistress has been hiding from Kudlak for 10 years. The message is 10 years old, because it turns out that the Mistress is a computer. She's not real. She's just on this screen. And she'd not been programmed for the eventuality that the war may end. She doesn't understand peace. That's why when Kudlak said peace, she went off on one. She's just kept going and going and going, because she's been programmed to continually survive, and if there's peace, there's no need for her. She has to keep going. And then the episode takes a slightly strange stance on war, because Kudlak becomes quite sympathetic, but it's sort of his thing of war was necessary for me to achieve peace. So I was a killer, but now the war is over. I want to return to a peaceful Yvonne planet. So he labels the Mistress an enemy and then shoots the screen, which, because apparently a screen equals a computer, but it's alien text or whatever. He shoots it, he kills the Mistress. He goes, "You're an enemy. I must kill my enemies." It's as if she's like the final enemy of the whole war. He shoots the screen. She dies. The computer dies. And it's almost like I guess it works as quite this alien mindset of, you know, he was a warrior and now he's not, and he is very remorseful actually about committing all the crimes that he has against Earth for the past 10 years, now realizing that they were crimes. And he's so remorseful that he offers up his own life to Sarah to take. He gives her, or he presents her, his gun and says, "You can kill me." And she says, "No. You need to be spared." Which, fair enough, we're not going to kill somebody on... Well, I mean, the show is fine with killing people, but it kills them off screen. She's not just going to shoot a thing in the head right here. But it's this entire thing is sort of based around honor, and you may now take my life, and I was a warrior, but now it is dishonorable for me to keep killing when we're not in wartime, and all this sort of thing. And so Kudlak says, "Okay, what I'm going to do is all these other kids that I've sent off to the front line, if they're not dead, I'm going to find them, I'm going to round them up, I'm going to bring them back to Earth, I'm going to reunite them with my families, and then I'm going to go and live in peace." And Sarah says, "Okay, that's fair enough." Kudlak allows them to teleport back, which, if she killed him just then and there, how would they have got back? So it's glad I didn't kill him then and there. Grantham, when they get back, Grantham has escaped, and Sarah's just kind of like, "Oh, well, no, he's the real guy here. I mean, Kudlak didn't do nice things. He killed a lot of people, but he's recognized that he's at fault, and he wants to put that right. Grantham, nah, he's just in it for the money. He's a really evil man." And Sarah's just like, "Oh, well, he's escaped. He'll probably get what's coming to him." I hope that implies that Mr. Smith is going to get him locked up anyway. But, anyway, one of the kids kisses Luke for saving them, and Luke is very bewildered by this, and it's a little bit like, okay, we don't have time to unpack all the implications of that, especially seeing as Luke was actually going to be gay, and then in the thing that they did after Sarah Jane Adventures ended, because Russell T Davies is gay, but it was like, oh, if you're allowed to show that on TV, and because he was a kid, and like, I don't know what the rules were, and as society became a bit more accepting, I'm not sure when gay marriage was actually legalized, but it was certainly legalized, I think, while I was in school. I think it was some point after 2007, and all this sort of there's a lot of this, and it's um at the end of the episode, Luke asks Clyde, okay, well, you've helped me out with all this slang, can you help me out with girls? And he's a bit like, oh no. But it's quite funny knowing that what will eventually come to pass. So Lance's mum is obviously very happy to see him home. Not sure how he's going to explain his disappearance. They just say he'll talk a lot about it, but his mum won't believe him. And they sort of imply that that's fine. Seems a bit weird. It seems like some people are going to need therapy to me, but sure. Sarah hopes that he'll be inspired to be an astronaut rather than a soldier. And she says maybe he'll even be the first man to walk on Mars. And then she goes, first human man, which is, of course, a reference to the Ice Warriors. And we know at the end of Tennant's run that there's Bowie Base number. I can't remember. Bowie Base 9? Bowie Base 10? That's the Mars base, isn't it? With all the water, and it's horrible. I hate that episode so much. It really freaked me out as a little, I don't know, 10-year-old or however old it was, 9-year-old. But I wonder if, I don't think Lance has ever been referencing that. But it would be nice if he was. But yeah, then Luke asks Clyde about girls, and he goes, oh man, and they drive off into the sunset. And the next episode, oh, everybody, hold on tight for the next episode. It's got a staple of Sarah Jane Adventures, the absolutely terrifying Trickster. So hold on tight for that. But before you do, I was worried that this episode would be a little bit more sort of mid-series filler, because we've had episode 0, the pilot, we've had episode 1, basically the pilot again, we've had episode 2 of sort of, we're kicking it off with it. It's a little bit filler, but it's sort of its own thing. Episode 3, I was worried it would be a slump, but I was very entertained by it, especially part 1. Part 2 was just a lot of chasing and a lot of sort of reiterating the same thing, and also not a lot really happening. It seemed quite long, but not. It seemed broad, but not deep, part 2. But overall, I was very entertained by it. I was pleasantly surprised by it. And I'm not sure if the story about like a war being over and nobody realizing is like ripped from something else. I think it happened in real life with like a Japanese soldier or something. But yeah, I've mentioned that I looked it up afterwards about the slabs because I went entirely over my head. But I'm glad they were in there as a reference. I thought that was really neat. I like the references in this. I like the design. I like the story. I like the acting. I really like this show, and I look forward to the next one. I hope you do too. So I'll see you then. In the meantime, bye.